housemoney.media.
Would you like to make $100,000 and only have to work 6 months out of the year? Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting, but that's the real treat about today's episode. I interview Matt Whitermore, an investor who has a very small niche, seasonal RV parks. I would imagine the tenants are a little bit more low-key in this situation. Nature probably adds a soothing effect as a landlord operator as well. But let's find out if this is a strategy for you. Welcome to the Real Estate Maximalist Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Corey. I'm the author of Housefire, Financial Independence and Retire Early, as well as $1 Million by 30. I've retired twice through real estate, and in my retirement, I've done nothing but more real estate. I've been investing for 22 years and run the Alan Corey team of real estate agents in Atlanta. I've done everything from short-term rentals, long-term rentals, flips, new construction, small multifamily, large apartment buildings, you name it, I've done it. But I find it's just easiest to say, I am a real estate maximalist. All right, we're here with Matt Whitermore. Welcome to Real Estate Maximalist. I'm excited to pick your brain today. I appreciate you making the time.
My pleasure, Alan. Happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, your niche is exciting to me, mainly because I have no experience in it. And so I love sort of just hearing new real estate strategies. And can you kind of walk through what your niche is with me?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really kind of a niche within a niche within a niche. The main niche is RV parks, not to be confused with mobile home parks. These are parks that have hookups and sites for recreational vehicles. Those can be travel trailers, drivable RVs, pop-up campers. We tend to stay within the campground niche. We're in the Northeast of the United States. So that typically means seasonal campgrounds, meaning parks that only operate for 6 months out of the year because we have our famous harsh winters. And usually that doesn't bode well for operating an RV park with water lines that will freeze and different infrastructure issues that just make it usually a pain in the neck to operate in the winter. There are some year-round RV parks, but by and large, these are 6-month properties. They're campgrounds, meaning hospitality properties. They're not residential. They're where people come to vacation for a week, a month, couple nights in an RV site or in a tent site where they come and pitch their own tent.
So I like this because what I'm hearing is that it's obviously profitable with just 6 months out of the year use. And the reason it's profitable, I would imagine, is because you don't have the overhead. There's not a lot of utility bills or anything. You're just paying property taxes and insurance in the meantime?
Correct, yes. So it's funny. We talk to investors all over the country, and usually the 6-month thing is not well received, at least initially. But once you talk to people about the dynamics, especially the cash flow dynamics that entails, it's usually pretty eye-opening. So you nailed it with the operating expenses for a seasonal property. Usually not a hard and fast rule, but we find it usually is true, is lower real estate taxes, lower liability insurance, the fact that you just don't have to operate in the winter. Your payroll is going to be next to nothing in the winter. So across the board, the operating expenses are much lower in the winter. Your taxes are lower. Your value of the property is usually going to be perceived to be lower. Obviously, that's not always the case when we're valuing properties based on the income that they make. And so there is, on the other side of the spectrum, on the income side, there's a really interesting dynamic at play here with the seasonal aspect, and that's the fact that these have largely over the decades have kind of evolved into servicing a full season renter, a camper. So people will pay up front for the entire 6-month season. It's a very affordable way to vacation. It's got a ton of demand and not much supply. So really good mix there and good dynamics. And then, as opposed to being a apartment landlord, you're typically not having to worry about delinquency. At least in New York State, where we operate, you're largely not considered to be a landlord. So you don't have to worry about evictions or any of the headaches that come along with being a residential landlord in a state like New York, which was one of the first things that pretty much slapped me right across the face, having come from the world of being a pretty much a workforce housing landlord. Before getting into this, it was like, well, wow, I don't have to worry about evictions. I don't have to worry about delinquency. Wow, the cash flow is just really jumping off the page. The numbers are incredible. This is really interesting. Let's go buy a bunch of these properties.
All right, so let's get to the logistics. What are you responsible for? Septic tanks, fire grills? Walk me through sort of what or the amenities and expectations of you have as an owner.
Sure. So we operate on the very rustic end of the spectrum. Currently operating one park and working to close on my second in the coming weeks, or hopefully less than 2 months. And so the first park really has nothing in the way of amenities. We have a store, we have a bathhouse. Every site gets a picnic table and a fire pit, but we are situated on a beautiful piece of real estate that is, features world-class fly fishing, famous Trout Creek in the Catskill Mountains of New York. So it's really the natural beauty and the natural amenities that attract our campers. So, you mentioned some infrastructure items. In our world, that tends to be very, very rural real estate. So you're pretty much resigned to private septic and private well water systems. So something, if you're looking to invest in this space, you should become familiar with these systems and have some experts on hand to evaluate systems as you're looking at acquiring properties, or be available to repair them or install new ones if you want to go into development or deep value add of any kind. So that's what we've been spending the last couple of years, sharpening our pencils on.
So the store, obviously, I can see that being a huge upmark on provisional items. You run out of milk or sugar or cereal, and whenever I've gone camping, yeah, you pay 3 times. I've never seen more expensive ice than I have at the campground. So what sort of staffing, or do you have to hire employees to live there? Do you offer them free housing? How do you manage the property, I guess?
Yeah, great question. That's typically how it's going to look. Depending on the size of the park, you're going to need anything from one full-time employee to a whole staff. So the current place is 50 RV sites and 23 tent sites. And so with that size, we can get by with one full-time manager. It's not really full-time because it's seasonal, but it's full-time during the season. And then it's a wonderful couple that lives on the property. Our manager manages the store and checks customers in and checks them out, and guides them to their site if they can't find their way. And then her boyfriend, a landscaper and laborer, and works hard to keep the physical presentation of the property up to par. So they make a great team. You can get by with the smaller properties with one manager, but I've come across some really impressive operations where they have staff of 40 to 50 seasonal employees, which is totally different ball game, and something we potentially hope to get involved in the future.
And then are people booking these online, or is there an app that you use or service? How do people even know about your property and if it's available to rent?
So we've tried a few different booking platforms. We've found that the best route is to find one that works to steal sort of a short-term rental Airbnb term as a channel manager that allows you to be on different booking platforms. So we're in the middle of that project right now of implementing a new booking platform management software that allows us to put sites on Airbnb and VRBO, and HIPCAMP is a hot for the camping world. So other than that, we've dabbled with some paid social ads on Facebook and Instagram to try and entice some seasonal campers to come check us out for a potential seasonal site.
Now, the big question I have is financing. Who finances this? What's the terms like? Or is this sort of an all cash sort of way of investing?
It's changing every day. There is a maturing debt market that we're experiencing. Still not quite there, in the territory of apartments or, your other main food groups of commercial real estate. There's a few select banks that lend nationally. SBA financing is an option for certain properties. They tend not to like the predominantly seasonal parks because they like a more transient profile and the profit and loss statement that seems to go with that of less seasonal income than transient income. So I have to date always used seller financing. That's really for two reasons. The first is what you touched on, is that, there's not so many sources for these types of loans as compared to financing a small apartment building, for example. You can always go to your local bank, but that's hit or miss and the terms might not be very good. The other piece of this is, with largely quote unquote mom and pop sellers who are generally less sophisticated and less worried about books and accounting and that leads to you finding properties that have total mess of books. And that's a hurdle to finance really anything. So that was our first acquisition, was we had to piece together the books. We were using, historical tax returns, receipts and notebooks and spreadsheets, kind of just piecing it all together, which I don't believe, would have gone very well with going to a bank to get it financed. And the seller was of that mind too. So they had kind of resigned themselves to providing seller financing when they go to sell this. So that's been a common occurrence.
Yeah, the person I'm visualizing that owns these and lives there is not the person who does spreadsheets with fine detail. This is sort of how I picture the owners of some of these campgrounds. Do you mind sharing the numbers on this property
Yeah.
and how much it cost you?
Happy to. Yep. So this acquisition was $850,000 with a 70% seller financing note. So that was $595,000 financed through the seller. There was a 20-year amortization schedule on this, but only a 5-year term. And we had 1 year interest only. And we were fortunate to do this before the debt markets went wild. So we got a favorable interest rate of 4.25%. So we're about a year and a half into this deal. And so we've started amortizing that loan. So the payments went up and we're starting to pay down that debt, which is with the cash flow that you can get. I mean, we purchased this property in place at about a 12% cap rate. Granted, that shifts a little bit and you have to figure out your payroll numbers because the in-place numbers that you're going to get usually don't include payroll because these are self-managed properties and people probably, there's a mixed bag of if people pay themselves a salary or not to do so. So it was more like, 11% cap rate once we put in our payroll numbers. It's about $150,000 a year gross revenue with drastic potential to perhaps double that number. Occupancy has been, I won't say poor, but that's our lever to pull here. Is rates are really good. We get premium rates for people to come pitch their own tents on our sites.
I just want to jump in real quick and explain cap rates. If this is unfamiliar to you, this is how investors size up commercial properties. And it's a simple formula to understand. Your cap rate is a percentage. You take the net operating income. So net is all the income minus all the expenses. That creates your net operating income. You're basically your profit for the year, and you divide it by the purchase price of the property. That percentage is your cap rate. And basically what that tells you is what percentage on return of your money would be if you bought this in all cash. And it's kind of a way to compare it to stocks. It's not elegant as stocks because you're getting mortgages and you've got payroll and all this stuff to work out. But it's basically saying if you bought this in all cash, like you would in stocks, you have to buy it in all cash. The cap rate of 10% means you'd get 10% return on your money. And you can compare that to the stock market that gets 10% return historically over the years. Again, not apples to apples, but it's the best quick snapshot metric that commercial investors can take. Now, something that has a higher cap rate, that's going to tell you it makes more money. But typically, if something has a 12% cap, 13% cap, 14% cap, that means it has more risk, right? Because the sale price will be lower, even though the net income is higher. That's what makes the cap rate bigger. And it's usually a little bit riskier. So something like a 6-month RV park has some risk associated to it. So I just wanted to explain that real quick. So I asked Matt, is this more of a fixer-upper play or is it plug and play right now?
We get pretty good rates for the seasonals, pretty good rates for the nightly RVs. So what we focused our last year and a half of time and money on, it was to clean up the property, which had turned into a bit of a junkyard over the years. So we invested a lot of money in junk removal, roll-off dumpster fees, demolition of, obsolete buildings that we didn't want around anymore. And so we've put about $225,000 into the property since closing on it. We're kind of just to the point after a year and a half that the property is in a presentable state. So we're going to lean heavy into SEO and marketing and photos of all the great work we've completed and new website, and trying to get as many eyes on the property now that it's presentable, because we were kind of concerned about doing that too early and getting a bunch of, 1-star reviews on different websites and things of that nature. So it's a little bit of a dance to figure out, when we were ready to try and get a bunch of new eyes and more eyes on the property. And now, we're closed for the season, but when we open in May, we're feeling really good about where the property stands, and we'll really figure out what we have on our hands. But I think we'll have a real opportunity to take that $150,000 gross revenue to $250,000 or $300,000, which would be fantastic.
And then, so you got 3.5 years to refinance this loan. So is that the idea, is to build those banking relationships over the next 3 years and see who can help you out?
Yeah, this property, because we do get so much income from our tent sites and from transient RV sites, is a really good candidate for an SBA loan, which is really interesting because you can do really high leverage. I don't know if that's going to be the right route. We'll see where interest rates are at that time, but we might get constrained a little bit by the interest rates and the debt service. But that's fine, because at that time we'll probably only have, $550,000 worth of debt to refinance. Yeah, a big cash out refinance would be fantastic. But if we have to just skate by and refinance the outstanding balance, our cash flow will be a lot better going forward. And it will be a low leverage deal, which is really great for risk profile. So we've got some optionality on how to proceed, but yeah, definitely need to figure out that refinance by the time 5 years comes up.
Now, I feel like this is not something you were actively looking for. This sounds like a deal that sort of fell on your lap and you're like, oh, wow, this is going to be my niche. How did you come across this?
You nailed it with that statement. So I started in workforce housing, small apartment buildings in upstate New York, purchased a handful of buildings ranging from 3 to 9 units. That was good. It was profitable, but it was during COVID. And even before COVID, New York, does not provide a climate that is desirable for landlords for a lot of reasons. So always had the idea that I wanted to pivot into something else. I didn't know exactly what. Before I started investing for myself, I had worked as a financial analyst for some banks and some big commercial mortgage brokerages, and was fortunate enough to work on all types of commercial real estate. And one area that really sparked my interest was the world of mobile home parks. Always loved the land lease concept of, just renting the dirt and not having to worry so much about repairs and maintenance and unit turnovers, other than just keeping the infrastructure, functioning. So had always, as an investor, prioritized, direct to seller outreach, off market deals. So all my apartment deals were off market. And then naturally always had mobile home parks in the back of my mind. So I built a big database of mobile home parks, started reaching out to these owners, and unbeknownst to me, a very small percentage of my list was actually miscategorized, and they were seasonal campgrounds. So around 2019 into 2020, people started getting back to me and saying, hey, Matt, yeah, I'm a seller, but this is not a mobile home park, it's a campground. And me being the kind of guy that says, why the heck not, when opportunities present themselves, let's go check it out. I found myself driving across New England, across upstate New York, touring these seasonal campgrounds, and met some incredible owners who had some incredible properties that were way out of my league at the time. It probably still might be out of my league. But anyway, they opened up the books. They answered all my naive questions. They, just kind of showed me behind the curtain and gave me like a 101 level course in campground operations. And exactly how you put it, it kind of just smacked me right in the face. Wow, this is a really cool niche. It sounds fun. It's different. I get to get my hands dirty, get to enjoy the outdoors, and the cash flow is immense. So started looking more deliberately into it. And a year later had closed on my first property, and knew right then and there that, probably the rest of my life, but definitely the next 10 years, I'm going to put most of my time and resources into building a portfolio of these seasonal campgrounds.
I would imagine right now is buying season. Like when you can't rent it out and the owner is not making any money, I bet you're going to get your best deals. Is that sort of the way you're thinking?
I found honestly both. I found like you want to be careful, especially if you're cold calling. You might strike a nerve with someone if you're cold calling them when they're operating their property. They might take offense to that. But I've also had it go the other way where they're so flustered about the operations of this property that they're welcome to the call. But yeah, I'd say more it falls how you put it, that they've closed the property, they're feeling good about that, but then a couple weeks go by and they're starting to think about May and the prospect of having to reopen this property. And a lot of these owners have operated the property for 20, 30, 40 years even, and it wears on them, it grinds on them. Yeah, you nailed it. You usually find people that are very open to the prospect. Like not too long ago, I cold called the guy. I always talk about the property, let them know that I'm an owner, that I'm also an RVer, that, I might be interested in camping with them, get them talking about their property, and then, kind of put a feeler out there. Oh, hey, would you ever think about selling this thing? People will just stop you and tell you their price. They won't even say yes. They'll just be like, yeah, $2.5 million. And
Yeah.
it just goes to show you that, you build rapport with people, but then put yourself out there and ask the question, and you might get an answer.
So were you an RVer, it sounds like, before you went down this path?
No. I think my only RVing experience was camping out in a pop-up camper in my friend's backyard when I was a kid. But shortly after buying the RV park, I needed a cheap or affordable place to stay. I was spending too much on hotels and motel rooms nearby. So one of my seasonal campers had a nice, really good condition used RV for a reasonable price that he was trying to get out of. So I said, hey, I'll buy this. That'll be my crash pad for a year. And now I'm actually selling it because I've gotten the property to a place where I don't need to be so present at the property, and don't need to have the RV there. So now I'm selling it.
So it sounds like you've basically put a line in the sand saying, hey, I do RVs, not mobile home parks. Why do you make that declaration?
I love the mobile home park business. I would love to own one someday. I have focused on high yield investments, high return, high cap rate investments. Today, that's not mobile home parks. They're great investments, but they're, especially at 50 or 100 homes or more, you're going to be looking at a mid-single digits cap rate, somewhere between 4 to 6 or 7%, depending on how tertiary the market is. For a campground, there's much more opportunity to buy at, a 10% plus cap rate, which is where I try to be. So, never say never, but for now, the focus is to just build up the portfolio, as fast as reasonable and safe, without doing bad deals. So that's the focus. I do really love the dynamic of not being a landlord. It changes from state to state, and you do find RV parks that do function more like affordable housing, but I'm comfortable with the operations of more of the hospitality side of the business, where it's a campground. I mean, you'll find RV parks that don't have they don't have an ounce of camping flavor in them. They're more like affordable housing, mobile home parks, but with RVs instead of mobile homes.
So if someone's new to this or thinking about getting into this, what would you say is sort of the big things to kind of look out for, or, think about lessons you've learned now that you're a year and a half into this?
Sure. So don't underestimate how hard or dirty of a job it is. If unless you've got a lot of confidence that you can step in and have, either an employee or a third party manager to take care of those things, be prepared to, you know, labor yourself to sit behind that cash register late to weekend nights because people, sometimes don't check in till late. It's really like managing a hotel without walls. Best part is you don't have to clean rooms, but you got to clean the bathrooms, you got to clean the store, you got to provide good customer service. But outside the operations, really the biggest learning curve is the due diligence, especially with the private septic and private well water. There's a lot more environmental concerns than you'll find with other types of commercial real estate. So especially like for us, we're on a body of water. So the DEP, the DEC, the Department of Health are all highly concerned with what we're doing at that property. We want to make sure nobody's polluting anything, which is a big concern. You could get in a lot of trouble if that were to occur. So want to make sure you understand that Department of Health regulations, the local laws, all that. But on the other hand, I would say if you are somebody that's willing to get your hands dirty, you're willing to live on the campground, there's it's a fantastic way to basically buy yourself a part-time job that could pay you, over $100,000 a year. As long as you're willing to live there for, extended period of time, you don't have to worry about hiring anyone to run it. I'd say, like the first park that I bought would have been a tremendous opportunity for somebody who was willing to live there. Didn't really, work for my family situation and, not being local to that. I'm local enough to get there, but wasn't really in the cards to live there. But if I did want to live there, I could be living there making $120,000 a year just off of that park and probably have another job while doing it. So really interesting. It's like taking the house hacking philosophy, but like putting it on steroids. And, I tell people it's like you could house hack it and have like a 73 unit Airbnb. We have 73 campsites. The revenue's lower per site, but much more significant scale and, better economics, better efficiency.
Are you providing Wi-Fi to these areas, or you just leave that up to the campers?
So we have Wi-Fi in a few select areas. This location it's really a getaway. It's very rural, very remote. We don't have any cell phone service, and that's a big draw. So it turns a small percentage of people off, and they might be the more vocal group, but a lot of people go there because there is no cell phone service. They can check out for a week. They don't have to worry about checking their phone. But I feel like we kind of hit the happy medium there where they can come to in front of the store in the morning. We always see people drinking their coffee, outside the store, check their email, and then they go back to their site for the day. And they got through the emails they could get through. They made the calls they had to make, and now they're back to the wilderness and enjoying some peace and quiet.
What are these properties typically zoned? Or like, could you build this into a single family neighborhood? Could you really do short-term rentals on Airbnb? Could you redevelop them? Or are they typically protected land that can only be used for this purpose?
Great question. So it seems like, and this is really just anecdotal, but it seems like there was a huge wave of these properties being built in the 60s and 70s, maybe even the 50s. And that's largely before a lot of the zoning and building codes were written. So a ton of these campground properties are grandfathered in, which is sort of a double-edged sword. Like both the property I operate and the one I'm working to acquire are both grandfathered in. They're situated on a beautiful creek that if you were to follow the zoning code and the building code today, you'd have to get a special permit approval to build a campground. But even once you did, you wouldn't be able to build any sites within 75 feet of the creek.
Right. Yeah.
So we're blessed with, some grandfathered status with some things that you wouldn't be allowed to do today. I call it a double-edged sword because it grants us some really awesome things about the property, but it also prevents us from, freely developing it. So if I want to go add a single site to the property, I have to go through that special permit process and build it 75 feet away from the creek. Yeah. So give and take.
Could you buy or turn raw land into this business model, or is that just seems prohibitive at this point?
That is a highly debated subject. I have an associate who is skilled and experienced at building these properties from raw land. So I know for a fact that it can be done, but it is not a small undertaking for all the reasons we discussed. There's not, in a lot of municipalities, there's really not zoning for campgrounds. You'll kind of run into a little bit of like NIMBYism kind of prejudice too, because sometimes it's like literally called trailer park zoning, or it's the same type of zoning that you would use to get a mobile home park approved. And most of the neighbors and the abutters in the community are not going to want to hear that a quote unquote trailer park is being built next to them. So they're usually going to line up to voice their opposition. There's not a huge real estate tax base that comes from these properties. So that's a reason that the municipality themselves might be opposed. It has largely been said that you cannot develop these properties, which is not true. It's like I said, it's an undertaking for sure. And it tends to skew, like with multifamily development, just because of the costs associated, it tends to skew things more towards the high end, the luxury, the camping resort, where rates are going to be super high because you have to justify the cost to build it. So, roughly we're looking at like $30,000 per RV site range to build as of like 6 months ago was the last time I got a quote on that. So it's probably higher today, but we're working to buy campgrounds for, sometimes under $10,000 a site, definitely under 15, 16, 18,000 a site. So we're regularly coming across properties that are well below the replacement cost, which that's always made a ton of sense to me with it. No matter what type of real estate you're buying is, why build if I can buy a property that's already operating, already cash flowing at a fraction of the cost sometimes.
No, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, for sure. Well, this is very interesting. Anything we didn't cover? Anything else you sort of want to mention about this niche?
Yeah, it's there's a super wide range of RV parks. We kind of touched on it. They range from full-time residential to, transient residential. They service a lot of really important workers in our country. There's going to be tons of infrastructure work going on. So those types of parks are super important. You'll find, pipeline workers or, heavy construction workers or, linemen doing new power lines, things like that, where they might find themselves in one location for a few months and then move on to the next. A lot of those people are full-time RVers. So I think it's a fantastic way to provide a much needed service on the more residential side. And then, on my end of the spectrum is the hospitality, outdoorsy camping side. It's I would say it's not as important of a service just because it's a vacation for somebody, but something that's been really rewarding is just how appreciative everyone is, how the customers I'm saying are usually very happy to show up, very happy to give their input, very pleasant customer base. That was a really nice change of pace from being an apartment landlord, especially in the workforce housing space, where unfortunately you sort of just by default you're made out to be the enemy or an adversary. So that's been super refreshing, is to have a non-adversarial relationship with customers as a real estate investor.
Are you doing any background checks when these bookings, or you collecting payments in cash, or is it all sort of done online by these different channels?
You know, it's something I thought long and hard about, just, coming from my background of being a landlord, because, I would rather have an apartment sit vacant than have the wrong tenant in there. But you have a much more advantageous position as, being a campground owner, because effectively what we're giving them is a license to use the property, which can really be revoked for any reason or no reason at any time. Somebody breaks the rules, or they're annoying their neighbor, or, they're playing their music too loud at night. You'll give them a couple warnings, but if they don't comply, even though they paid you up front for the whole season, you can basically say, hey, you're not playing by the rules. Sorry, you're not welcome here anymore. You got to take your trailer out of here. And it's less of a burden as the investor and as the owner, because it's not the person's house. It's not where their family lives. It's a lot less consequential as a situation to try and remove someone. So that's been a nice change of pace.
And they've got wheels. Just
Right.
take your wheels somewhere else. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. They can go to the Walmart parking lot and post up for a couple of days if they have to.
Yeah, which I think that is quite popular for a lot of those
Oh
24-hour
yeah,
Walmarts. Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, well, great. If people are interested in learning more, I know we met on Twitter. Is that the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. On Twitter, I am at iBuyRVParks.
Okay. I love this, Matt. Just personally, I want to follow what you do with this. You made me excited about it, and I hate camping. I'm more of a glamper, but it makes complete sense to me, and especially with COVID. I mean, this local outdoor. I'm sure. I know you missed that window, but I can't imagine that season probably if it ever happens again, or if we have a recession. I bet much more people are going to stay local, do the camping, the budget vacations. I think you're setting yourself up for perfect
Yeah.
timing in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's the idea. That's the plan. We'll time always tells with these things, so we'll certainly find out.
Awesome. All right, Matt Whitmore, I buy RV parks on Twitter. Reach out, bring your deals. If you got questions, networking. I would imagine this is a very small niche, and so you're very quickly you'll meet all the players and all the owners, and I would imagine you would love to swap stories and property
Oh,
management
definitely.
tips and everything like that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Love to collaborate.
awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story here. Appreciate it, and best of luck to you.
Thanks so much, Alan.
Wow. These are my two big takeaways from Matt Whitmore. One, he discovered his niche accidentally. That's what I love about this show is introducing you that there's a million different ways to make $1 million in real estate. And he happened to do it in seasonal RV parks. I didn't even know that was a thing, but of course it's a thing. And you don't know what your niche, your passion could be until you go out there and try. Go buy something, go look for deals, go talk, go network. My second favorite thing is he used seller financing to buy this deal. A bank wouldn't give him a loan for it, so he talked the seller into giving them the loan, being the mortgagee. Matt had to bring 20% down payment, but he could have raised that 20% from friends and family, other investors, hard money lenders. You can combine all these different strategies. And this is what I teach, both of this, the outgoing outreach, the creative financing in the Broke Method course. If you go to realestatemaxi.com courses, check out the Broke Method to real estate investing. That means you're investing without any money. I still do this to this day. Every single real estate investor eventually runs out of money, but they don't run out of deals. And I teach you how to keep that momentum going, because the worst thing ever is to find a deal and not move on it because you don't have the money. What you really have is you don't have the knowledge of how to move forward to close on this deal. So that's what I teach in the Broke Method. Matt is using these things because the 5 pillars of the Broke Method: big deal flow. He's finding the 12, 30% cap rates on these seasonal RV parks. R, reputational pull. He's now branded himself the I Buy RV Parks online. Of course, he's going to be the first person everyone reaches out to if they're selling an RV park. What wonderful reputational pull he's building right there. The O in the Broke Method is ongoing outreach. He's already cold calling these folks, and he's trying to reach other RV owners. K, the knuckle up ability. He's busting his butt to fix it up, get it ready in the off season so that they can print money come camping season. And E, he's excited about the execution, and he wants to come on my show, tell everyone I'm buying these, and he's going to buy more and more. And he told us his goals were to get up to the ones that have staff sizes of 40 and 50. Man, put that excitement out there, and it makes people want to join your journey and help you and invest with you. This is the 5 pillars of the broke method right here. So go to realestatemaxi.com, check out courses, or follow me on Twitter at realestatemaxi. I'm your host, Alan Corey. I'll see you next week on Real Estate Maximalist.